Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel. And if you enjoy the video, leave a like and a comment. It really helps us out. Thank you. Let's begin. I was between jobs when I picked up a temporary overnight gig cleaning offices at Chandler Plaza. It wasn't ideal, but I needed rent money, and the agency said it was easy, no one around, just a checklist, a cart, and a building full of dust. Chandler Plaza sat on the edge of a half-abandoned commercial strip in the older part of town, 5 floors of tinted glass and faded signage. Most of the tenants had moved out years ago. Now it was mostly small businesses that operated during the day. At night, it was dead quiet. Too quiet. They gave me a key card and warned me about 2 things. Don't mess with the elevators if they get stuck, and always double lock the stairwell doors on the upper floors. I thought it was overkill. Seemed like they were trying to scare the new guy. My first couple of nights went fine. A little boring, honestly. Just me, my headphones, and the sound of vacuuming. I'd start on the top floor and work my way down. I usually only saw 1 or 2 other people, other cleaners, or a security guard doing rounds, but most of the time, it felt like I was the only living person in the building. On my 4th night, something felt different. It started around 1:30 a.m. I was on the 6th floor, finishing up near Suite 608, an accounting firm with frosted glass and stiff furniture. I'd already cleaned it earlier that night, emptied trash, wiped surfaces, vacuumed. I remembered clearly locking it behind me. But as I passed by again, I saw the door was slightly ajar, just enough to see the darkness inside. I stopped. I knew I'd locked that door. I remembered double-checking it. It was second nature by then. I even made a habit of jiggling the handles to be sure. I hesitated for a second, then knocked softly. "Maintenance," I called out. No response. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was dark. Too dark, the blinds were drawn tight, and it smelled faintly of old coffee and printer toner. I flicked on the light. Someone had been there. The rolling chair at the main desk was pulled back slightly and angled toward the door, like someone had just stood up. On the desk was a paper cup, half full, fresh, still steaming. My heart picked up. I hadn't seen that cup when I was in here earlier, and I definitely hadn't moved the chair. I backed out slowly, relocked the door, and moved on. I tried to convince myself maybe someone had come in after I cleaned, maybe a late worker, and forgot to lock up. It happens. But then, 40 minutes later, I had to pass by again to grab supplies from the storage room at the end of the hall, and this time, Suite 608 was wide open. Not cracked, wide. No lights on, no sounds, just that gaping doorway staring at me from down the corridor. I stood frozen, watching for any movement. None. But I felt it, that awful, unmistakable sense that I was being watched. The kind that makes the hair on your arms stand up and your chest tighten. I didn't go in this time. I backed away slowly and took the stairs down to the 4th floor. I stayed there the rest of the shift, skipping my final sweep. The next morning, I reported it to my supervisor. I tried to keep it light, just mentioned someone might be accessing 608 at night. She didn't laugh. Instead, she looked up from her desk and said, "You're not the first to mention that suite." That caught me off guard. I asked what she meant. She leaned back in her chair and said, "That office has been empty for over 2 years. No tenants, no access. We don't even have a key on site, just the master override." I told her what I saw. The door, the coffee cup, the chair. She didn't blink. Her advice? If it opens again, don't go in. Just walk past it. And maybe avoid the 6th floor if you can. I worked 2 more nights. I kept my head down. Never looked toward Suite 608 again. Then I quit. Something about that place, about that room, still eats at me. I don't know who or what I almost walked in on, but I've never taken another overnight shift since. I was 21 when I started working the graveyard shift at a 24-hour diner off the highway. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid better than my last job at the car wash, and I liked the quiet. The place sat just off I-85, sandwiched between a rundown motel and a gas station that always seemed to be closed. It was the kind of place you'd only stop at if you were desperate for food or rest, and most of our customers were exactly that. There were usually 2 of us on at night me on the floor, and Lou in the back cooking. Lou was an older guy, mid-50s, always smelled like cigarette smoke and grease, but he was decent. Didn't talk much, but he had this weird sixth sense for trouble. If a drunk came in too loud or a guy lingered too long in the bathroom, Lou would already be dialing the cops before I even realized something was wrong. It was maybe my 3rd week when something happened that still makes me uncomfortable to think about. It was around 3:15 a.m. on a Wednesday. Dead, quiet. I was wiping down the counter, trying to stay awake, when I noticed a man walk in. Not unusual, except I hadn't heard the bell over the door and it always chimed. He was tall, maybe 6'2", wearing an oversized parka and jeans that looked stiff with grime. He didn't say anything, just walked over to a booth and sat down. Booth 9. I remember that. I grabbed a menu and walked over. "Coffee?" I asked. He looked at me, but didn't answer. His eyes were bloodshot, dark circles under them. Something in his stare made my stomach twist, not angry or aggressive, just cold, blank. "Sir?" I asked again, quieter this time. He nodded once, slowly. I went back behind the counter, poured the coffee, set it down on the edge of the booth. He didn't move, didn't touch the cup, just stared at the table. A few minutes passed, then another 10. I noticed he hadn't taken a sip. Just sat there, still as stone. I called into the back, "Lou, you see this guy?" He stepped out and glanced over. "That guy give you trouble?" "No, he just won't speak or move." Lou didn't say anything at first. Then he said, "Keep an eye on his hands." That was it. Then he went back to the kitchen. I looked back. The man's hands were under the table. I didn't want to make assumptions. I've had homeless folks come in before just to warm up, but something felt off. Not threatening exactly, just wrong. I walked past his booth, casually glancing down. He wasn't doing anything, just sitting there, palms down on his thighs. But his knuckles were white. He was clenching hard. I decided to stay behind the counter. Around 3:40, another customer came in a trucker. Sat a few booths down, chatting on the phone. That seemed to break the spell. The man in the parka suddenly stood up. He didn't look at me, didn't say a word, just turned and walked out. No footsteps, just silence and the soft swish of the door. I watched him through the window. He didn't head to a car, just walked toward the dark patch between the diner and the motel, then disappeared into the shadows. I locked the door behind him. We're not supposed to do that during hours, but Lou didn't say a word. After the shift ended, I told Lou the whole thing made me nervous, that the guy gave me a bad feeling, like he was waiting for something or about to do something. Lou just lit a cigarette and said, "He's come in before, always real late, never eats, never drinks." I blinked. "So what does he do?" Lou looked out the window and said, "He watches, until he's not interested anymore." I never saw the guy again, but every time I worked the night shift after that, I kept something heavy behind the counter, just in case. For about 6 months, I worked overnight security at a storage warehouse on Avery Street. You know, the kind long rows of metal doors, motion lights, concrete floors that echo every step. It was a quiet job. Just me, a logbook, and a walkie-talkie that barely worked outside the break room. I liked it, mostly. I didn't have to talk to anyone. Just made hourly rounds, checked that the units were locked, logged the time, and moved on. I listened to podcasts. Sometimes I'd even bring a book, as long as the cameras stayed quiet. But there's one night I still can't shake. It was a Thursday cold, wind howling through the gaps in the doors. Around 2:00 a.m., the motion alarm for Unit 238 went off. I was in the office, sipping lukewarm coffee, and I remember rolling my eyes. Motion sensors in these places are twitchy. Dust, bugs, even shifting air could set them off. I went out to check anyway. My flashlight cut through the dark as I made my way down the row. It was dead quiet. No wind now, just the sound of gravel crunching under my boots. When I reached Unit 238, everything looked normal. Lock in place. No sign of damage. Still, I knocked out of habit. "Security," I called. Nothing. I stood there for a second, uneasy. Then reset the sensor and went back to the office. 10 minutes later, the alert went off again. Same unit. 238. That time, I checked the exterior more carefully. I tugged at the door, checked the frame. Still locked tight. I made a note in the logbook. False alarm. I didn't like it, though. Something about the way the air felt there. Too still. Like the space around the unit was holding its breath. When the sensor tripped a third time, I radioed my supervisor. He was off-site, but still technically on call. He answered groggily. I told him what was going on. "You sure it's not a rat?" he asked. 3 times in 30 minutes? I don't know. "Should I open it?" He paused. "Yeah, open it. Might be a break-in." Technically, I wasn't supposed to open customer units without written approval, but we had a bolt cutter in the break room for emergencies. The lock was ours anyway. So I cut it. The door clanked as I rolled it up, metal groaning in the silence. The unit was empty. Not dusty empty, clean empty. As if no one had ever stored anything there. Just gray walls and a concrete floor. It even smelled new. I stepped inside for just a second, swept the flashlight around. Nothing. I turned to step back out and stopped. There were footprints on the floor. Just one set, heading toward the back wall. I hadn't seen them before I stepped in, but now they were there, faint but clear. Heavy boots, like mine, but smaller. I stepped back slowly, heart pounding. The unit was still dead silent. I rolled the door back down, relocked it, and returned to the office. I stared at the screen with the motion alerts. Nothing else triggered for the rest of the night. Next day, I told my supervisor everything. About the alerts, the footprints. He didn't look surprised. "I've had guys quit over that unit," he said. I asked what he meant. "Used to be a woman who stored stuff there, back in 19, real private, came late, always alone. Then one day, she just stopped coming, never cleared it out. We auctioned it off, and it was empty. Completely, like she never used it." I asked what was in the report. He shrugged. "Didn't file one. Wasn't worth the trouble. I didn't quit immediately. But after that night, I never walked past Unit 238 without checking over my shoulder. And I never, not once, opened it again." I took the night shift at Belleview Assisted Living, mostly because of the pay. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid more than my day job at the clinic. I'd just gotten out of school, and I needed to chip away at student loans fast. Bellevue wasn't a bad place. It was old, sure linoleum floors, buzzing fluorescent lights, and the smell of bleach that never really went away, but the staff were kind, and the patients were mostly quiet. Tired people who just needed help getting through the night. There were only 2 of us working the floor after midnight. Me and Riley, another nurse a few years older than me. Riley was tough, fast-talking, and had worked there long enough to know every creak and quirk of the building. She smoked too much and hated wearing gloves, but she never missed a vitals check. That night started off normal. We gave out meds, did our rounds, logged charts. Some patients were already asleep before 10. Others just wanted someone to talk to for a bit before dozing off. I liked those moments. They reminded me why I went into nursing in the first place. Around 2:30 a.m., I was doing a second-round walk when I passed room 117, Mr. Delaney's room. He was in his late 80s, mostly bedridden, not much of a talker. As I walked by, I heard a faint knocking, very soft, rhythmic, not from the hallway, from inside the room. I hesitated, then knocked gently and entered. He was asleep, breathing steadily. The lights were low. Everything looked in order. but the sound continued soft knocking, like fingernails on wood. I checked the window. It was unlocked, which was unusual. We kept all the windows locked from the inside, standard policy. I slid it shut, checked the bathroom, then did one more scan of the room. Nothing. I left, made a note to mention the window to Riley, and moved on. 10 minutes later, walking past room 119, a room that had been unoccupied for months, I heard something again. A sound like shuffling or dragging. I stopped. There was no reason anyone should be in that room. I hadn't even cleaned it in weeks. I opened the door. It was dark inside, heavy with the smell of disinfectant. I stepped in just barely and turned on the overhead light. The room was empty, but something caught my eye along the baseboards near the window. There were faint smudge marks, like someone had been crawling. Dirty fingertips, or shoes. I didn't know what to think. I stepped back out and called Riley on the radio. No answer. I tried again. Nothing. That's when I started feeling that weird weight in your chest when you know something's wrong, even if you don't know what yet. I went to the nurse's station. Riley wasn't there. I checked the staff bathroom. Empty. Eventually, I found her near the laundry room, sitting on a chair with a half-smoked cigarette in her hand, staring at the floor. "You good?" I asked. She didn't answer right away, then finally said, "Someone knocked on the back exit door 5 minutes ago. No camera out there." I felt cold. Neither of us said much for the rest of the shift. We stuck close, finished rounds together. In the morning, I brought it up with the head nurse, told her about the sounds, the unlocked window, the knocking. She listened, then quietly said, "You're not the first to mention something like that, but there's never anything on the cameras, probably just a stray patient wandering at night." That didn't sit right with me, because I knew what I heard, and I knew the rooms I checked were locked, dark, and supposedly empty. I finished out the week. Then I turned in my badge and moved to a day shift at another facility. I still don't know if someone was trying to get in that night or trying to get out. I used to work at a gas station off Highway 12, one of those isolated stops between towns, where your only company after midnight is the buzzing lights and maybe a raccoon by the dumpster. The place was called Mile 46 Gas, and it ran 24/7. But let's be honest, from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m., it was just me, empty roads, and silence. I liked the solitude. I brought a book, kept the radio low, and cleaned when I felt like being productive. The manager, Gary, didn't care what I did as long as the drawer balanced and the cameras were on. Most nights were uneventful. But one Tuesday, dead of winter, below freezing, things got weird. It was around 2:45 a.m. I was restocking the fridge when I heard a car pull in. Not unusual. Truckers, road trippers, sometimes shift workers from a nearby plant came through. But this one stood out, an old white sedan, headlights off. The engine stayed running. Nobody got out. After a minute or two, I walked around to the window to peek out. There was a man in the driver's seat, wearing a hoodie and sunglasses at night, just sitting there. The way he was angled, it looked like he was staring directly at the door. I waited. Maybe he was lost or checking GPS. But then he reversed, backed up slowly, not to leave, but to park along the side of the building, out of the light, still running. No one else around. No other cars on the road. That's when I locked the door. We're technically not supposed to lock it during business hours, but I didn't care. Something about the way he moved, slow, deliberate, watching, made my gut twist. 5 minutes passed. I pretended to keep working, but I kept glancing up at the window. Then I noticed something else. The passenger door was open. I hadn't heard it, but now it was just wide open, dark inside. Still, no one came in. I radioed Gary, who was asleep at home, but left a message anyway. Then, I checked the outside cameras from the back monitor. The man was gone from the driver's seat. I scanned the side angle, nothing. I checked the rear cam. That's when I saw him. He was standing just out of frame at the back door. the employee-only entrance. Just standing. No knocking. No movement. Just waiting. The door was locked. I checked it myself twice that night. But there was only a thin pane of glass between me and the back lot. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Eventually, after maybe 5 minutes, he turned and walked off into the dark. No car doors slammed. Just silence. I waited 10 more minutes, then looked again. The car was gone. I stayed locked inside until sunrise. When Gary came in, I told him everything. He shrugged it off at first, probably just some tweaker. But later, when we reviewed the footage, his face changed. He paused the video right when the guy walked toward the back door, looked at me and said, "You did good locking that door." I never saw the guy again. But after that, I always kept the key near me and the baseball bat behind the counter. Some people don't want gas. They're just looking for an opportunity. I took a job at a fulfillment center just outside town, one of those giant warehouses where online orders get picked and packed all night long. The money was decent, and the hours worked for me. Midnight to 8 a.m. Most people hate that shift, but I didn't mind the quiet. It was a newer facility, bright, clean, organized. Rows of shelves stretching as far as the eye could see. Dozens of workers during the day, but only a skeleton crew overnight. Maybe 4 or 5 of us, scattered across the entire building. Sometimes it felt like walking through a maze alone. That night started like any other. I had my scanner, my list, my cart. I was on the far west side of the building, aisle 143. I remember pulling small electronics, Bluetooth speakers, earbuds, phone cases. I had music in one earbud, just loud enough to keep my brain active. Around 2:15 a.m., I thought I heard something, a loud clank, maybe a box falling or a cart tipping over. I pulled out my earbud and listened. Silence. I waited a moment, then kept moving. But something about the air felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it. Like I wasn't totally alone in my section, even though no one else was scheduled to pick in that zone. I rounded the corner toward the next aisle and noticed a cart sitting in the middle of the path. That wasn't unusual. Sometimes people leave carts and forget, but this one had nothing on it. Just a clipboard, turned upside down. I called out, "Anyone here?" Nothing. I checked the clipboard. No name, no ID, just a blank sheet. That was weird. I moved on, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had just been standing there, maybe watching me. My scanner started acting up too lagging, freezing between items. Never happened before. About 20 minutes later, I headed toward the break room. On my way, I passed by the loading dock, a huge metal space with garage doors, usually locked and dark at night. But one of the bay doors, just one, was slightly open, maybe 6 inches, just enough for a hand to fit through. I stopped. That door should have been locked. Only the day crew has the access code. I radioed the lead Devin and asked if he was near Dock 3. "Nope," he said. "Haven't been down there all night." I told him about the door. He sounded annoyed. "I'll check the logs. Might have been left open by maintenance." I stood there a minute longer. Then I backed away and went straight to the security office. The cameras are recorded, but we can only view footage with a manager login. When Devin showed up 10 minutes later, I asked if he'd pulled the logs. He nodded, looking at the monitor. Weird. No swipe-ins in that zone since 9 p.m. Then he looked at me. "You sure you didn't see anyone?" I shook my head. He paused. "There's blind spots. Those loading doors? If someone knew the right path, they could be inside and not show up on any camera." I didn't like the way he said someone. After that, we both did a sweep of the building. Found nothing. Everything seemed normal. But I noticed something before I left that morning back in aisle 143. That same empty cart was gone. The clipboard, too. I asked around the next shift, but no one saw anything. I quit the following week. I still don't know if someone was messing around that night, or if someone was inside who never should have been there. Back when I was 19, I worked at a self-serve car wash on the edge of town. It was one of those 24-hour places with coin-operated bays, vending machines for air fresheners, and a tiny office booth with cameras and cash drop safes. The owner didn't want to pay for real security, so he hired me part-time, nights only. My job was simple: clean the bays, empty the trash, and keep an eye out for trouble. Most nights were dead quiet. Maybe a few late-night drivers, or people washing their trucks after work. I actually liked the job. It gave me time to think. But one night changed how I felt about being alone. It was early November, already cold after dark. Around 1:30 a.m., I was sitting in the booth watching the monitor feed 4 black and white screens showing each bay. One was occupied. A black SUV pulled in around 1:15. Guy got out, started spraying off the front like he'd hit something, maybe mud, maybe roadkill. He wasn't using soap, just water, over and over. 15 minutes later, he was still at it. That caught my attention. Most people are done in 5-10 minutes tops. I leaned closer to the screen. He had the hood open now, spraying the inside. It felt odd. I stepped outside and casually walked past, pretending to check the vending machines. When I got closer, I realized he was washing just the passenger side. Doors, window, even the wheel well. There were streaks on the concrete, dark ones. Could have been oil, could have been something else. I gave a polite wave. "Everything good, sir?" He didn't answer, just stared at me, then went back to spraying. I went back to the booth and watched. At 2:03 a.m., he finally finished. But instead of driving off, he pulled forward a few feet and got out again. This time, he opened the back hatch. I couldn't see what he was doing. He stayed behind the vehicle. I thought about calling someone, but what would I even say? Guys acting weird? A minute later, he closed the hatch and drove off. No plates on the back of the SUV. That part really bothered me. I walked out to check the bay after he left. The water was still draining. The concrete was clean, too clean, like he'd scrubbed every inch. The trash bin next to the bay was empty, which was strange, because people always leave towels or bottles. But what I remember most was the smell, faint, chemical, and sour. Like bleach mixed with metal. I checked the cameras again. The whole interaction had been recorded. I made a note to tell the owner in the morning. But when I came in the next night, the hard drive with the camera feeds was gone, just missing. I asked the owner. He said the DVR unit had been having problems, and he'd sent it for repair. No one else seemed to care. A week later, I quit. I still think about that night. About the way that man cleaned only one side of his car. The stains on the pavement, the empty trash can, and the way he looked at me when I asked if everything was okay, like he was measuring something. A couple years ago, I worked overnight security at a small regional hospital. Nothing fancy, 4 floors, 2 wings, 1 emergency room, and a whole lot of flickering lights. I was posted mostly in the West Wing, near admissions and outpatient services, which were closed after 9 p.m. Most of my shift was just walking the halls, checking that no one had slipped in through the side entrances. We weren't exactly downtown, but people wandered in, sometimes drunk, high, or just lost. I didn't carry a weapon, just a flashlight and a radio. But honestly, I never felt like I needed anything more. Until one night changed that. It was a Wednesday's slow night. Light rain outside. Almost no movement on the floors. Around 2:40 a.m., I passed through the main lobby and saw a man sitting in the waiting room. Mid-40s, heavy coat, baseball cap pulled low, duffel bag at his feet. That was strange. Admissions were closed. ER was on the other side of the building, and no patients had checked in for hours. I walked over and said, "Sir, can I help you?" He looked up calm, polite, and said he was waiting for someone. Claimed his wife was in the ER. I nodded. But something felt off. For one, visitors had to check in at the ER desk, and security was always notified if someone came through. No calls, no notes, nothing. I radioed the ER guard, asked if a patient's husband might have come over to the West Wing. He replied, "We haven't had any female patients tonight, none with family." I turned back toward the man. He was just sitting there, hands folded in his lap, staring at the wall. I didn't confront him again, just nodded and stepped into the hallway, keeping an eye on him from the side. 5 minutes passed, 10. Then he stood up, picked up his bag, and walked down the hall toward the outpatient offices. That wing was closed. All the doors were locked. I followed at a distance. I watched him stop in front of one of the diagnostic rooms. Room 217. The door was locked, lights off. No reason for him to be there. He stood still, just looking at the handle, for at least a minute. Then he turned and walked away, right past me. Didn't say a word. I asked, "Are you lost?" He just smiled. "No, just stretching my legs." Then walked straight out through the main entrance. I stood there for a long moment. When I checked the camera logs later, I realized something. He hadn't come through the main door. No entrance record, no side door alerts, no ER check-in, no motion sensor triggers. And on the footage, nothing showed him entering. Only leaving. I showed it to my supervisor. He didn't say much, just wrote it off as probably a glitch or bad angle. But I knew what I saw. I'd talked to him. The next night, I asked one of the ER nurses if anyone ever mentioned a man waiting for someone who never checked in. She said, "Not recently, but that used to happen. A couple years ago, someone kept showing up after hours. Same story said he was waiting for his wife, but there was no record of her, or him." I didn't ask more. I finished my shift, turned in my badge at the end of the week. Some things aren't supernatural. Some people are just looking for places where no one pays attention. Hospitals at night are full of ghosts, but sometimes they're still breathing.